Hello students, today we shall study the fifth chapter, The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde in your book Moments. About the author, Oscar Wilde was born on 16 October 1854 in Dublin, Ireland. He was an Irish poet and playwright and the author of numerous short stories and a famous novel. He was one of the most popular playwrights in London of Victorian age. He was famous for his brilliant wit and showy style. I think the title of the story, The Happy Prince, need not to be explained, as happy is that person who has all the comforts in life, who has never seen the sorrow and miseries in life. Here, the prince is called happy because when he is alive, he has all the comforts of life and he has never seen the sorrow and miseries in his life. And even after his death also, he is gilded with the gold all over. I am asking to you, have you ever judged anyone by their appearance or the comfort he has in life? By the finest clothing and expensive watches or expensive things? The idea of judging someone based on their appearance is the central idea of the story The Happy Prince. Wilde tells us about a majestic statue of a prince adorned in gold, leaves, and jewels such as sapphires and ruby, which overlooks the city. But despite his wealth, he is not happy. He is saddened by the miseries and sorrow of the poor. So let's see the story how the prince reacts to the sorrow. What is the real happiness for the prince? Is it the gold he has, or is it to bring the smile on someone's face by helping them? Here are mainly two characters in the story and few other characters. The first one is Happy Prince. Happy Prince was a statue whose body was covered with gold and his eyes were made of sapphires. He stood very high so he could see the misery of the whole town. And the second one is the swallow. The swallow was a migrant bird and got an overnight shelter at the feet of the statue and started acting as the messenger of the prince. So let's begin. The statue of the Happy Prince stood high above the city on a tall column. Column is a pillar. He was standing on a tall pillar. He was gilded all over by thin leaves of gold. Gilded means he was covered with gold. His eyes were made with two bright sapphires, and a large ruby glowed on his sword hilt. Hilt means the handle of the sword, and ruby and sapphires are precious stones. He spent a joyous life when he was alive because he was kept ignorant of the suffering of the people of his kingdom. But now, while he is standing at the top of the high hill, for the first time he could see the misery of the people of the city and he was unable to move and help them. One day, a little swallow which was on his way to Egypt landed on the statue. He was tired, so he decided to spend his night at the feet of the statue of the Happy Prince. But as he was going to sleep, a large drop of water fell on him. The swallow was amazed. There was no cloud, yet it rained. The second drop of water made the swallow decide to fly off. The third drop of water made him to look at the statue, and he found the statue weeping. The statue spoke to the swallow. It told him that when he was alive, he had a human heart and did not know what tears were. He lived in a palace where sorrow was not allowed to enter. His courtiers addressed him as Happy Prince. But now, standing at this high pedestal, he could see the miseries of the people of this city who were hungry. He wanted to help them but couldn't move. He requested the swallow to stay with him for some time and help him in helping the poor. The swallow was moved to see the kindness of the prince. He agreed at once. He became the messenger of the prince. The happy prince told the swallow that he could see a woman, a seamstress, who was embroidering flowers on the gown for the loveliest of queen's maid of honor. Loveliest of queen's maid means the most pretty maid of the queen. In the bed at a corner of the room, her little sick son was lying, who was asking for an orange, but the lady had nothing to give him except water. The kind-hearted prince asked the swallow to pick up the ruby from his sword hilt and give it to the poor lady. At first, the swallow said that his friends had gone to Egypt and he was waited for in Egypt. But the happy prince requested him to stay for one night. The swallow agreed. He picked up the ruby and flew to the woman's house. He put the ruby near the woman's thimble. Thimble means a cap for the finger or a thumb. He also fanned the boy's forehead. The boy felt a bit better. He felt a relief. He sank into a deep slumber. Slumber means sleep. So in this way, the happy prince helped the seamstress by sending his great ruby through the swallow. The swallow flew back to the happy prince. Though it was very cold, but he felt warmer. The happy prince told him that it was because he had done a good act. The swallow wanted to fly to Egypt, but the happy prince told him to stay there one more night. He told the swallow that he saw a playwright in a little room. He was trying to finish a play for the director of the theatre, but he was too cold to write. He was hungry also. He asked the swallow to pluck one sapphire from his eye and give that to the playwright. Getting the sapphire, the playwright became very happy. Next evening, the swallow went back to Happy Prince to bid him goodbye. Again, the prince requested him to stay back one more night. Then the prince told him about a match girl at the square below, who lost her matches in a gutter. Now, her father would beat her if she did not bring home some money. So she was crying. Therefore, the soft-hearted prince asked the swallow to pluck the sapphire from his other eye and give it to the girl. The swallow put the sapphire into the little girl's hand. Being happy, the girl ran home laughing. As the prince gave away his two eyes, now he became blind. The swallow felt pity for the prince. He told the prince that he would stay with him always. The happy prince told him to fly to Egypt, but he did not go. He sat on the prince's shoulder and told him of marvelous things he had seen in this strange land. But the prince told him that the most marvelous thing was human suffering and misery. The happy prince also asked him to fly over the city and tell him what he saw. The swallow did so. He flew over the city and saw hungry children and poor beggars. He found two little boys lying in each other's arms to keep themselves warm. The heartless watchman drove them away. Listening to all these, the kind prince asked the swallow to take off leaf after leaf of the fine gold over his body and give them to the poor. Do you remember that in the beginning of the story I told you that the statue of the happy prince was covered with the fine thin gold leaves. So he was asking to give these leaves to the poor people. The swallow did so, and the poor laughed and the children played in the street. The weather had become extremely cold. The snow fell and then the frost. Everything looked white. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder but did not leave the happy prince. He realized that he would die. So the swallow asked the prince to let him kiss his hand. The prince told him that he was happy for the swallow that he was going to Egypt. But the swallow told him that he was not going to Egypt, he was going to the house of death. And ultimately, he fell down dead at the feet of the statue of the happy prince. At that moment, a crack appeared inside the statue. Actually, the heart of the statue broke into two at the loss of his real friend, the swallow. Next morning, the mayor of the city and the town councillors visited that way, and they found the statue useless and unattractive as it became dull now. The statue was pulled down and melted in a furnace at a foundry. Foundry is a place where metal is melted and molded. But the leaden heart could not be melted. It was thrown in a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. God asked one of his angels to bring him the two most precious things in the city. The angel brought him the leaden heart of the happy prince and the dead swallow. God praised the angel for the right choice. God said that the little bird would sing forever in his garden of paradise, and the happy prince would praise him in his city of gold. Can you tell me why did the angel choose these two things as the two most precious things in the city? And why did the leaden heart of the happy prince not melt? It is because the happy prince was a kind, sympathetic, and compassionate for others. He sacrificed everything for the good of others, and this goodness can never be destroyed. You know, when we help or serve the poor and the needy, we serve the God. The real happiness lies in helping the needy. And God is also pleased with the human beings who help the poor people. So we must keep others' happiness very important and help them in every situation. I hope you enjoy the story and understand the message hidden in the story. And the most amazing thing is that I have also read this story in my course and my childhood. It seems very interesting to me also. So at last, once again, you read this story by your own with the help of your NCERT book. Keep practicing, keep learning. Thank you.